What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my initial transfer plans for Game Week 8, which is basically another way of saying it's a team selection video, but in the first week of an international break. So I'm going to go through how the team is looking, thoughts on long-term moves around structure. Do I sell Haaland? What my transfer plans might be this week, next week, etc. I'll probably do exactly all the same next week in the team selection video on Thursday. But if you do enjoy this and you want some content for the international break, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button. Let's jump into it. So let's start with the goalkeepers and defenders. I've got 2 free transfers this week and no money in the bank. So if I want to make any upgrades, I've got to downgrade another player somewhere else. With double Arsenal defence, Raya and Gabriel, not ideal that they've conceded to both Leicester and Southampton, which on paper look like guaranteed clean sheets. But as we know, football and FPL doesn't always work like that. So not an ideal situation, but I still think going forward, I don't want to be messing with those 2 players. I just want to keep double Arsenal defence for as long as I can. There will be times where I need money for other moves and I'll consider getting rid of them, but I don't think I'll ever go through with it. I think last season, I've mentioned this before, I had double Arsenal defence from game week 12 right until the end of the season, and it was so easy just to leave them in because they could get clean sheets from nowhere. In terms of Gabriel, you've got those potential for goals as well. Ray, you've got saves too. I just don't really want to move them on, despite the fact that over the next few weeks, the clean sheets don't really look like they're going to be coming. Bournemouth away, Liverpool at home, Newcastle away, Chelsea away. It's going to be tough, but if any defence can get 1 or 2 clean sheets from those games, it is Arsenal. And from 12 onwards, the fixtures are excellent for quite a while. I just don't want to mess around with transferring them out and then back in. So they're definitely going to stay. I think with Trent Alexander-Arnold, I mentioned yesterday how good the Liverpool defence has been so far this season. The next few fixtures will be the true test of just how good they are. How many chances can they limit the opposition having, basically. With Trent, I'm in a position where I'm okay to sell him if I really need to, but I'm not in a rush to do it either. And I think for the way my team is set up, I've got Greaves from Ipswich on the bench and Pinnock from Brentford. And if you look at Trent's next few fixtures, I'm okay playing him against Chelsea at home. I don't expect a clean sheet, but I think it's a possibility. We know he can get attacking returns as well. Arsenal away in 9 is tough, but in game week 9, if Lewis is still playing, I've got him against Southampton at home, decent fixture. And if I own him, which I almost certainly will in game week 9, I'm going to have to play him. Unless we get a team league that he's not starting, he will be in my side. Southampton at home is too good to turn down. I think with Gabriel, I'm always going to play him no matter what. So Liverpool at home, okay, it's not ideal, but I'm still going to play him. So I only need to play one other defender, and Pinnock has Ipswich at home. So if I really wanted to, I could just bench Trent in game week 9, so I would dodge that fixture. And then in 10, 11 and 12, it's Brighton at home, Villa at home, Southampton away. Not easy for clean sheets either, but better fixtures on paper. So my plan with Trent is to keep him until I feel like I really need the funds for another move, which I'll talk about in a minute. And in which case I might get rid of him to a different defender. But I think at the moment, the only defender I feel like I'm missing is Pedro Porro. And even in that case, after watching the Brighton game, I was wondering whether I really need a Spurs defender. Like, I think they probably have improved overall this season so far, but they're still not going to be one of those teams that we can rely on for clean sheets. So if Porro's not going to get me those attacking returns on top, like, do I really need him? If I was wildcarding this week, I would definitely have him because of the fixture swing for Spurs. And because he's only 5.5, he's nailed on, etc. But for my team, where I'm not wildcarding, I don't know if I really need him massively over the next couple of weeks. Like, I'm more than happy with my defence in 8. I've just mentioned how it looks okay in 9 as well. Is Porro someone that could wait until a little bit later? And outside of him, unless I'm missing someone, like Vardiol could be good, but I've got Lewis, I don't feel like I'm really missing out. Like, there's good 4.5 million defenders, but there's not going to be a rush to buy them at any point. Like, Ain't Nuri maybe from game week 10, Lewis Dunk from Brighton maybe from 12 onwards. I don't need to worry about that in game week 8. So I'm quite happy with the defence. With Lewis, as I mentioned yesterday on early thoughts, I think I've just got to keep him. I've got to stop worrying about the fact that he might not start. Like, it could happen. Is it going to be the end of the world? Probably not. And Wolves away and Southampton at home are good. So, like, in FPL, where possible, I try and not overthink decisions that really just don't matter. I'm just not going to move a player on. And realistically, I've just got to accept that Rico Lewis is going to be in my team for the next 2 game weeks. So stop worrying about whether or not he's going to start. I'm not going to bench him against Wolves away. I'm not going to bench him against Southampton at home unless we get leaks. And we probably won't for either of those 2 matches. So he'll be in my 11. I think from 10 onwards, I will consider selling him because you've got Bournemouth away, Brighton away, Spurs at home, Liverpool away. But until that point, he's only 4.7 Man City defender. I know Man City defenders can be frustrating, but they're less frustrating when they cost less than 5 million. So I don't think there's any need to make transfers this week unless I really want to make an upgrade elsewhere. But at the moment, I don't think I need to do that. So with my midfield, my decision this week really depends on what my long-term thoughts are around one player. And that player is Cole Palmer. Does he come into my squad? The answer to that question is probably yes. If so, when? And who leaves to be able to put him in? Essentially, do I want to keep this squad structure or do I want to break it so that I can have both Saka and Palmer, right? So the current midfield is Saka against Bournemouth away, Fernandes against Brentford at home, Mbeumo against Man United away, and then Rodgers against Fulham away, with Semenyo on the bench against Arsenal at home. Now, the easy thing to say would be I just sell Fernandes to Palmer. Great. I would love it if I had an extra 2.5 million in the bank, but I don't right now. So to fund that move, I would have to sell Trent. Again, I'm not against doing that. I just don't know if it's the right decision to make this week. And because I've got nothing in the bank, if I do Fernandes to Palmer, let me just find him here, I would then need to sell Trent to a 4.4 million defender. Now, the player that everyone will talk about is, of course, Aït-Nouri, and I'm not against doing that whatsoever, but he's got Man City at home this week. So if I do that, I'm then not playing Trent this week because I've sold him. I'm not going to play Aït-Nouri against Man City at home, so I'd have to play Greaves instead. Also, I would be bringing Palmer in before he plays Liverpool away. There's just something about that that doesn't sit right. Taking Trent out for a defender playing against Man City and then bringing Palmer in when he plays Liverpool away. Would I rather have Palmer against Liverpool away than Fernandes against Brentford at home right now? Of course. But I don't know if it's worth using two free transfers. So potentially I could do that in game week 9 instead when Trent's got Arsenal away and Palmer has Newcastle at home. So that is something that I'm considering. I just don't think it's a move that I need to make this week. And it's only something I can do if I'm willing to break my structure. So it would basically be Gabriel, Lewis, Greaves, Pinnock, and then a 4.4 million defender. That feels like quite a cheap defence. And right now, there's not been a huge amount of clean sheets over the last couple of game weeks. And, you know, Arsenal have been conceding, so suddenly spending that much money doesn't look great. But these things can quickly change. And I just don't know if I feel massively comfortable with that cheap of a defence to force Palmer in before he plays Liverpool away. So I will almost certainly not make that move this week. And I would just think about it again in game week 9. The other option is to keep this structure where I've got Trent, I've got a Fernandes, but he could move down to like a Maddison or a Johnson. And then eventually I do Saka to Palmer and just stick with one premium midfield structure. But I'm not sure if I'm massively happy about that either. And therein lies the problem. And I think ultimately, because Palmer's got Liverpool away this week, I will just put that decision off until game week 9. I think the most likely option for me this week is just to roll the transfer. Like, Fernandes against Brentford at home, not ideal. He hasn't been good whatsoever. I think most people would rather have a Maddison or a Brennan Johnson. I get that. But I think if I'm not sure who I want that player to be, like, as in, do I want Palmer in that Fernandes spot? I might as well just roll instead. And like if it's Fernandes against Brentford at home up against Brennan Johnson or Maddison against West Ham at home for 1 week only, I'd rather just keep Fernandes and roll the transfer into game week 9 because then that does leave me other ways long term to fund that Palmer move. I know this is probably going to be quite tricky to follow, but for example, if I had 3 free transfers and I did Fernandes to Palmer and Trent out, I could always do something like Semenyo down to Dibbling, who's 4.6. That would then give me 5.4 million to spend on this defender replacement for Trent. Now, unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to afford Porro for that, but I might be able to go for someone a bit more interesting than Aït-Nouri. I think Aït-Nouri is fine, by the way, from game week 10. I just don't necessarily want to buy him right now. So I feel like just having that extra transfer, having 3 free transfers, just leaves me so much more flexible than using 2 to bring in Palmer before he plays Liverpool away. I could, of course, just do a straight up move of Fernandes to Johnson, and that is definitely something I'm going to consider this week, and that would leave me 1.7 million in the bank. But it's not like I can sell a different midfielder to then go and get Palmer apart from Saka. And I think Saka long term is still a really good hold. Like from 12 onwards, I also really like Arsenal's fixtures, just like I like Chelsea's. So that's basically my dilemma. When do I get Palmer and who for? I think ideally I get him for Fernandes by selling Trent. It just doesn't feel like the right move to do this week. So I'd almost just rather roll a transfer into 9. I think I'm more than happy playing in Burma against Man United away. I'm more than happy playing Rodgers against Fulham away. There's not many players I feel like I'm missing apart from Palmer and a Spurs midfielder, and I can't have both. Well, I can have both, but I've got to sell Saka. So that's why, like, I know on paper it looks so obvious, just sell Bruno Fernandes, but I think overall it's a little bit more complicated than that, or at least I feel like it's complicated for my team. I think the most likely course of action is I sell Trent. I just don't want to do it next week. Anyway, rambling. Let's talk about the forwards. And then up front, it's Haaland against Wolves away, Solanke against West Ham at home, and Calvert-Lewin against Ipswich away. On Calvert-Lewin, I think anyone that owns him is starting to get a little bit frustrated because he has blanked for 3 game weeks in a row. Leicester away, Palace at home, and Newcastle at home. And I think anyone that doesn't own him not only isn't thinking about bringing him in, but also thinks that those of us that do have him should sell him. Now, for me, he's one of those players that I will give zero thought to selling over the next 3 game weeks. It's Ipswich away, Fulham at home, and Southampton away. Now, some people will say that's a trap. Because the fixtures are so good, you're not going to think about selling him when you should. I just don't think there's any point in worrying about it when the fixtures are that good. There's always going to be a transfer that is a higher priority than selling an attacker that's playing 90 minutes every game on penalties before those 3 fixtures. So, long-term, Calvert-Lewin might go, but it's not going to happen in game weeks 8, 9 or 10 unless he gets injured. And I know people have concerns about his injury record, but I've said this plenty of times. He started 26 times last season. He started every game so far this season. He's played 90 minutes 4 games in a row. There's not really any concerns until it happens. I'm not going to preempt an injury. And if he does get injured, I'll obviously use a transfer to get rid of him. But right now, there's just no point, in my opinion. And it's similar with Solanke. I think there's been a little bit of hype around him the last couple of weeks, not massively, and he hasn't fully delivered, right? Only 6 points in game week 5, 6 points in game week 6, and 5 points in 7. But he has got 3 returns in 3. The bonus isn't quite there yet, but we know that Spurs side is capable of scoring even more goals than they have done recently. And I think he's just always going to be front and centre for that. He does sometimes drop deep, and then it's Brennan Johnson and obviously Werner in the last couple of matches that are getting involved as well. But he is always in and around that box. So I'm not particularly worried because it's West Ham at home, Palace away, Villa at home, Ipswich at home. And to be honest with you, with 3 returns in 3, I think different to Calvert-Lewin, Solanke is a player that people would be looking to buy right now. And so I feel like I'm a little bit ahead of the curve on that, even though the actual points so far have not been massive. Hopefully that's to come. But again, another player that I don't really need to worry about until that Man City away game in game week 12. So he's definitely going to stay. With Haaland, I think in the current situation with FPL or the kind of wider landscape, teams without Haaland, especially when he's blanked the last 2 game weeks, are looking great right now. You know, Palmer only gets 6 points this week, or Saka's got 16. The week before, Palmer's got a 25-pointer. Watkins has been doing well. Non-Haaland teams look really great. But for those of us that have got him, this is not the right time to sell. Despite the blanks, despite Rodri not being there, despite De Bruyne being out, Wolves away is such a good fixture, and Southampton at home in game week 9 is brilliant as well. Again, it's just not worth thinking about. Like long term, you can definitely consider plans that revolve around selling Haaland, going to a non-Haaland draft and keeping that for a few weeks. But the next 2 weeks just look so good for captaincy. And the other thing is for me, they also coincide for weeks where the other premiums are not amazing. Like this week, Saka against Bournemouth away is fine. Haaland's better. Salah's got to play Chelsea. Palmer's got to play Liverpool. In game week 9, you know, Saka's playing Liverpool. Salah's playing Arsenal away. And okay, Palmer's not bad against Newcastle at home, but I'd rather captain Haaland against Southampton at home. So for me, that's a decision to make after game week 9. I think in 10, 11, 12 and 13, you got 3 away games, Bournemouth, Brighton and Liverpool. The home game is Spurs. You can probably captain other players in that time. Like Haaland is not going to be a must-have. My only worry with selling him is none of those fixtures also look completely terrible apart from maybe Liverpool away. And then from 14 onwards, it's Forest at home, Palace away, Man United at home, Villa away. And then from 18 onwards, the fixtures get even better. Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, Ipswich. So it's always going to feel like the wrong time to sell him. But if I'm going to do it, it's probably going to be in game week 10 or maybe game week 12 with a view to possibly getting him back around game week 18. But I got a feeling, again, this is where I need to really decide on where Palmer comes in, that I'm going to want to keep Haaland the whole time. And if I do that, I don't have a huge amount of money to get Palmer in. So I might just have to stick with the one midfield structure. But the way that that's gone recently, I'm not sure if I do want to do that long term. Maybe I do jump on the Haaland-less drafts. Then it also feels like you're a little bit behind. That's the problem with Haaland, right? Because he's so good. It's going to feel like the time you sell him is when he'll go and bang. And that it'll feel like you're getting on the no Haaland draft too late. Like, people have done really well. It's a bit like people that didn't have Haaland for the first 5 game weeks, then wildcarded him in game week 6. Really bad timing. Not necessarily a bad decision, just bad timing. And that's how I'm going to feel like any time I think about selling Haaland. Because once it's done, you're not just going to get him back in straight away. It's going to be weeks without him. But I think what this season has shown so far is there is going to be times where it just works. There's people without Haaland who have missed all his goals so far. They're absolutely smashing me in terms of overall rank. So it just goes to show that the money you save does allow you to build a stronger squad overall. And as long as Saka, Palmer, Salah, etc. get some kind of returns along the way, which they will, they're all brilliant players, you're going to have a good captain most weeks too. So I'm going to give... That's basically what I need to decide. Where does Palmer come in? Am I going to sell Haaland soon? They're the big decisions. And that's why I don't want to mess around with changing defenders or selling Bruno to a Spurs midfielder, using up one transfer. I really want to nail those big decisions and then, yeah, make those transfers. So I think right now my plan is, after all that, my plan is probably to roll in game week 8 and then from 9-10 onwards, think about possibly selling Haaland and getting in maybe Saka, Palmer, trying to fit Salah in possibly as well. And they're just rolling with that for a few weeks. But overall, I think the team looks pretty good on paper. I didn't get a captain return from Haaland last week. I still got a green arrow. I think most of that team looks okay. I'm not massively worried about Fernandes up against a Maddison or Brennan Johnson for 1 week only, because that's all it might be. And no one else there is a must-sell in my eyes. You might think different, that's fine. But for my team, I'm kind of happy with it. If you've enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. I'll still do team selection next week, which I know will be very similar to this, but who knows? Stuff might crop up over the international break. There might be a few injuries that I need to use transfers on. Otherwise, that's probably going to be it now until next week when the normal videos will return. So enjoy the international break. Look forward to FPL coming back next week, and I'll catch you then.